This month I am adding a commentary track to provide more information about the birds in the photographs. In September we took a week-long trip through the central coast northwest of New South Wales, visiting the Warrumbunges, Lightning Ridge, Burren Junction and Yarrie Lake. While some of the birds could have been photographed locally, it is always useful to record them in other places too. The second part of this slideshow records birds I have photographed locally near my home in the western Lake Macquarie area. Let's begin with the trip. Apostle birds are found throughout the inland of Australia, often in groups of about a dozen, hence their name. On this trip I photographed only individual birds and did not manage to catch their group interactions. They are very funny birds to watch. I managed to get an apostle bird in flight at Walgett. They spend a lot of time picking up crumbs left by campers. They show no fear of humans and will even scavenge between your feet while you are eating. Australian ravens are common in this area. They are also the common corvid at home at Lake Macquarie. This is an individual bird as indicated by the dark eye. They take about 2 years to develop their characteristic white eye. Here is a mature Australian raven showing its white eye. This photograph also shows the bunch of feathers known as throat hackles. These stand out when the bird is calling. The throat hackles also distinguish the Australian ravens from the Teresian crows. A pair of Australian ringnecked parrots at Burren Junction. Australian ringnecks are found over much of inland Australia. There are 4 races, and while they all have ringed necks, their plumage can be quite different. Just to confuse the issue, we get intergrades where their ranges overlap. This one sat among the dead branches, making it difficult to get a clear photograph. The black-fronted dotterel is found inland everywhere there is a bit of water. They also frequently visit lagoons and ponds. These photographs were taken at Lake Yarrie near Warrumbunges in New South Wales. There were several birds present and they remained for the 24 hours we were in the area. Some of them were exhibiting breeding behaviour. Although it looks like surf behind the birds, the waves were in fact only about 10 centimetres high, giving some indication of the size of the birds. At Burren Junction I saw a lone black-shouldered kite hunting over the grain stubble paddocks. We have had several black-shouldered kites at home near Lake Macquarie, but it was good to see them out here as well. One of the birds that I had hoped to see more of was the blue bonnet parrot, but as luck would have it this time, I only saw one in company with the ringnecks. It remained partially obscured by the branches. As you can see, it is quite a colourful parrot. While we were at Lightning Ridge, we saw a pair of crested pigeons doing their courtship dance right next to our camper van. They were so preoccupied that they did not notice when I circled right around them to get a bit better lighting. There was a lot of bowing and fanning of tails. This particular dance lasted for about 5 minutes with occasional rests. There is no plumage difference between the sexes, and even in the dance, they both engage in the same display behaviour. Occasionally the chase was on, but it was never sure whether the male was chasing the female or the female was just warning off the male. The chase would last for about 3 seconds. And just as suddenly as it started, it was back to feeding again. We stopped for lunch near a public park at Walgett where we found a domestic goose and a grey-legged goose following one another around the pond. I do not know if they interbreed, but judging from their behaviour, probably. Both these birds are from domestic stock and are often seen on waterways in parks. This diminutive Australian grebe, previously known as the little grebe, seems to enjoy the company of the geese. This photograph gives some idea of their relative size. Eastern Rosellas penetrate some distance inland in New South Wales. We found quite a few of them in the Warrumbunges National Park. I could have photographed these at home, but it's nice to record them here too. There are crimson rosellas in the area, but we did not see any on this trip. In Lightning Ridge, I came across some fairy martins. They are fairly common in western New South Wales. Although they have been reported from near home in Lake Macquarie, I have not seen them there. They were gathering mud from a puddle near a leaking tap for their nests under the eaves of a public toilet. I risked the questioning gaze of local council workers as I photographed these with my long lens. They build bottle-shaped nests on the ceilings of cliff caves, the eaves of buildings, and under elevated water tanks. They are social birds and you often find many nests together. I have included a couple of comparison photographs here to show the similarities and differences between species related to the fairy martins. Fairy martins and tree martins are similar in behaviour and size and looks. It is worth noting that the fairy martin has an orange-coloured head, while the tree martin has a grey head. Tree martins nest in tree hollows, while the fairy martins build mud nests as shown in the previous slide. Welcome swallows are also similar to fairy martins, but note that the orange is much more noticeable in the fairy martins than the welcome swallows. Welcome swallows also have a much more pronounced forked tail than the fairy martins. In the Warrumbunges National Park, I photographed inland thornbills, a lifer for me. A lifer is a bird that I have not previously observed. They are very similar to the brown thornbills we see and photograph around Lake Macquarie and elsewhere near the coast. To be honest, I don't think it'd be very easy to tell the difference between the two. So it's just as well that their ranges do not overlap in the Warrumbunges. Jackie winters are like a grey version of the eastern yellow robin. Their behaviours are very similar. They sit on fence posts and low branches before hopping down to catch their prey on the ground. These were photographed near the Visitor Centre at the Warrumbunges National Park. They occasionally turn up in the Lake Macquarie area too, but I only see them a couple of times a year. There were plenty of laughing kookaburras in most of the locations we visited on our trip. Typically, they advertise their presence with their laughing call. We heard these musk lorikeets in the Warrumbunges long before we saw them. Musk lorikeets are quite common, but because they are small, green and feed in the canopy, they are difficult to see. Their calls are higher pitched than rainbow lorikeets. There are several pied butcherbirds in the Warrumbunges camping area. Being opportunistic scavengers, they often benefit from dropped or unguarded food. They can be very quick, so if you are eating outside, it is a good idea to be on your guard. Pied currawongs are always present in the Warrumbunges. Their calls are part of the campground bird chorus. This one did not mind posing for its portrait. Pied currawongs are very similar to crows and ravens, but have yellow eyes and white spots under their wings and on their tails. At Burren Junction, I found a female or immature red-capped robin that seemed to follow me around. I must have been disturbing the insects and make it easier for them to catch. Unfortunately, I did not find a mature male with its bright red cap and breast at this time. I was able to concentrate on photographing the female without being distracted by the colourful male. The red rumped parrot is the predominant species of parrot in the near western region of New South Wales. They feed mainly on plant seeds, and because of that they are mostly called grass parrots. The male is quite vibrant with its blue-green tones and the red rump that gives it its name. This is the female red rumped parrot with its muted tones and green rump. Red rumped parrots are usually quite approachable and easy to photograph. This is the rump rear view of the male red rumped parrot. They are usually found in pairs or small groups feeding on grass seeds. They can get quite aggressive towards other red rumps, and I have seen a number of fairly vigorous disputes, probably over territory. We found a number of white-necked herons, particularly near the bodies of water such as Lake Yarrie. These birds are in breeding plumage, as indicated by the black spots on their white necks. One of the highlights of the trip was to encounter the white-winged fairy wrens at Burren Junction. I knew they were in the region because I had encountered them previously and was hoping that I would get some better photographs this time. The male bird was quite shy and only popped out of the undergrowth a couple of times. The females were much more assertive and spent a lot of time on the top of the scrub. Unfortunately, I missed getting a good photograph of the white wing, but at least you can see the brilliant blue of the male in breeding plumage. Like most fairy wrens, the males have an eclipse period where they look like the females. Yellow rumped thornbills spent a lot more time on the ground than most of the other thornbills. They have a distinct yellow rump, which has led to their colloquial name, butterbums. It is not uncommon to see half a dozen of them together, feeding rather like finches. These ones were photographed at Burren Junction, but they're fairly common throughout western New South Wales. It looks as though this bird in this photograph is gathering nesting material. And now we are back in Currumbong, on the western shores of Lake Macquarie. The resident Australian darter is sitting on one of its favourite spots. I would love to catch it doing a bit of fishing one day. Bassie and thrushes have been seen quite frequently on the paths for a couple of months now, and it makes me wonder if they are nesting in the area. When I first started photographing birds here about 12 years ago, one was nesting quite close to the walking tracks. Since then, their visits have been infrequent. Bluefaced honeyeaters frequently come to our bird bath, where they tend to bully the other birds. They even tease one another. I've seen them drop from a branch into water behind one of their mates just to splash them. The adults have bright blue faces, while the immature ones have a more greenish shade. The blue-faced honeyeaters appear to be guarding the bird bath. While we have quite a few species using it, mostly they are fairly peaceful and generally take turns. I think the chestnut teal have paired off for breeding now. They usually form large flocks on dams and lakes, but on Dora Creek we typically see pairs, or sometimes a pair with a family. Shrike tits are seen reasonably frequently on the local walking tracks. They often give their presence away by the sound of them tearing bark off branches to get insects and spiders. Eastern yellow robins are my interference birds around home. Just about every time I go walking I find one, and they like to hop in front of the camera and have their photographs taken. They are currently nesting, so I'm trying not to disturb them on their nests with my photography. Eastern yellow robins are ground feeders, so you will typically see them perched on the trunk of a tree scanning the ground for prey. They are not shy, and if you stand still, will come quite close. Galahs are busy looking for nesting hollows at the moment. They often feed on the ground in small flocks. Inland I have seen large flocks perched all over a dead tree, making it look like a pink magnolia in flower. There are quite a few golden whistlers around this month. They are very vocal and their wolf whistle calls are quite distinctive. The males are brightly coloured while the females are grey-brown. Golden whistlers are my wife Carmel's favourite birds, so I always get brownie points for photographing them. There are a lot of grey fantails in the bushy areas of the walking tracks. It is spring here, so there are several nests near the tracks if you know where to look. The grey fantails are currently feeding high up in the canopy. There are not many mosquitoes around, so I guess that they are feeding on other insects higher up. As a photographer, I am always trying to photograph fantails with their wings and tails spread. They are quite erratic flyers, so to get the whole bird in the frame is a bit of luck. Large-billed scrub wrens are the ultimate little brown bird, or LBB. What they lack in colour, they make up for in activity, and we often see them weaving their way along the branches under the leaves looking for insects. They often get around in groups of about half a dozen. There are always kookaburras watching from the trees. I've seen them attacking termite nests in trees, so I presume nesting is in progress. The little egrets at the Yarrie Power Station outlet channel are showing their breeding plumes. Apart from the two feathers growing from the back of their head, they also grow plumes on their lower backs. It makes them look quite fluffy. Here is a close-up of the head plumes. The same little egret doing a bit of rock hopping. I found this large-billed Corella feeding on the roadside. It was one of a pair. They were feeding on the roots of kikuyu grass, and it's noteworthy how well their bill is adapted for this task. A close-up of the bill of a long-billed Corella. Another visit to the backyard bird bath. The noisy miners regard the bird bath as their own personal territory. They usually come in the afternoon, and I've seen them having a lot of fun diving in and shaking the water off. I have encountered female and immature regent bowerbirds several times this month. The black and gold male birds have remained frustratingly hidden. Regent bowerbirds seem to spend a lot more time high in the trees than their satin cousins. The scaly-breasted lorikeets have been hanging around holes in old or dead trees lately, so it is obviously nesting time. They are often found in company with their noisy rainbow lorikeet cousins. The scalies have a higher pitched call, but it takes practice to notice the difference. When I go to the Yarrie Power Station outlet channel, I usually spend some time photographing silver gulls in flight. The best photographs are where the gulls are turning to dive or snatching food from the surface of the water. It takes a bit of eye-hand coordination. We have a lot of sulphur-crested cockatoos near Lake Macquarie. Their loud raucous calls usually give them away, but the other day I found a tree with about 10 of them in it, and they were not making a sound. They were so busy eating. The male superb fairy wrens are mostly in their breeding plumage at the moment and look very handsome. When they're about 4 years old, they retain their colour all year, but the younger males go through an eclipse plumage during the winter. The variegated fairy wren is the other fairy wren found locally. It has a blue bonnet, whereas the superb fairy wren has a blue cap and cheek patches. I think the variegated fairy wrens are a bit shyer than the superbs, and it takes a bit of patience and luck to photograph them. This one was a bit of a show-off and spent several seconds being photographed before flying into the scrub. The white-browed scrub wrens spend most of their time scratching in the leaf litter under thick scrub. They are often seen in the gaps under logs. They are very similar to their cousins, the yellow-throated scrub wrens, and can be hard to tell apart. Look at the little chevrons on their wings. This is a yellow-throated scrub wren. Like their cousins, they have a white brow, but in good light you can see their yellow throat. Note that they do not have the chevrons on their wings. They often come out on the tracks and feed in front of you, but they will often hop along, keeping their distance as you walk towards them. Usually there are a lot of white-cheeked honeyeaters on Boys Walk, but I've only seen a couple this month. They should be nesting around now. The yellow-tailed black cockatoos have a squealing call when they are flying. They get around in flocks of about 10, but I once counted a flock of over 50 yellowtails flying overhead. When they are feeding, they can be very quiet, with the sound of dropping branches being the only indication of their presence. If the food, eucalyptus nuts, are present, they will frequently return again and again. However, they are very mobile birds, and sometimes we go for months without seeing any. And that brings us to the end of this month's slideshow. If you enjoyed it, click on the like button. And if you want to be notified when I put a new slideshow, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Thank you for watching.